Hi everybody. So this is just going to be a quick overview of sort of my initial impressions of Oathmark and what my plans are moving forward. I plan on it kind of being a sort of a video log of my work on my armies and my gaming uh, with this rule set. So to start off with, I am a veteran of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, the old rank and flank fantasy. I got into that probably when I was about 14 years old, back in 5th edition. I played all the way up until the game was discontinued. However, I still play 6th edition with my friends now and then, so I am definitely, I would say, the target audience for Oathmark, in that I like mass fantasy battles, rank and flank maneuvering, that sort of thing. Now, what pulled me into Oathmark rather than some of the other systems that are floating around like Kings of War, were first of all, it was the miniatures. I really liked sort of the old school Tolkien-esque, early D&D style of miniatures that they were coming out with, that North Star's coming out with. And I think that does a lot to establish sort of the flavor of the game. But what really grabbed me and pulled me in was when I found out there was how you made your army. So instead of a set army list with maybe some allies, what you do is you build a kingdom. And from that kingdom and the territories you control within that kingdom, that determines what units you can take. I thought that was brilliant. Right away, that lends itself to campaign play, narrative play, and I've always been one to sort of make a backstory for my army. I name all my characters. Even when I started way back when, I just couldn't imagine playing another way. So I've always felt much more comfortable in a game that's set up and geared towards that. So just my initial reactions on looking over the rule book. So one of the first things that jumped out at me is that I like it's not an I go with my whole force, you go with your whole force system. It reminds me of a indie game I really enjoyed recently, This Is Not a Test, which is sort of like a post-apocalyptic skirmish game. But just like in Oathmark, you make a test to activate, and then if you fail that test, you can make some actions, but not your full actions. So I really like how it alternates. I also really enjoyed that rather than a bunch of kind of bizarro, overly specialized units, you basically have a core. The core of your army is made up of rank and file warriors of your race. So whatever race you're taking, you're not taking, like, half of your army isn't steam golems. If you're dwarves, most of your army is going to be dwarves. Same thing for all the other factions. And, there are options to take some of those more fantastical creatures and units, but the core of your army are the warriors of your race. And then going further into the rules, I was actually kind of surprised by the lack of special rules, and sort of, and this sort of dovetails with, most of the armies are just regular troops, but things that I've almost always come to expect in any fantasy game now, like rules for, I know there's a poisonous cloud rule, but just there's no poison rule, or, a rule like flammable or immune to fire, or any of those sort of rules that you wouldn't encounter in a historical game for sure, but in a fantasy game where things have supernatural abilities, um, I was kind of expecting to see more of that. And I was hoping that maybe some of those special rules would help uh, flavor the armies, so to say, whereas since they were still mostly just made up of troops. Um, the other thing that kind of shocked me was that there are no, again, coming from Warhammer Fantasy Battles, coming from Hail Caesar, and other sort of historical games, Black Powder, that there's only really one formation type, and that's the block of troops 5x4. And I was a little bit disappointed in that, because I think sort of the dynamic positioning of units can really lend a lot to a game, and sort of just make the spectacle of a game that much more interesting when you have to have your archers all in a line, and your infantry is in a solid block, and your pikemen have to adopt a column to march down a road or to get over a narrow bridge. That's something that I definitely think that the base game is missing. I hear that in a upcoming expansion we're going to be seeing that. I don't know exactly, how developed that's going to be, or what that's going to look like, whether it's just going to be, you're just going to put a token next to the unit and say, now these guys are in a phalanx, or now these guys are skirmishers. But I mean, even with that coming out, I think that would be, that just strikes me as something that should have been in the base game. It's just something I've come to expect in a game like this. So then, sort of my plans going forward, I mean, even with the criticism, I still like the game. I still think there's a lot of potential in it. I'm still excited to get playing. My first army that I plan to work on is an army of gnolls, that I'm going to be proxying for orcs. I've already got a few boxes started on them. I have a unit of warriors that unfortunately I can't show now because I'm at work, but starting up on converting a unit of line breakers, giving them some heavier armor and some different weapon variations. I will be posting those soon. We've got a hunting pack of, basically using the elf huntsman rules for a pack of hunting hyenas. I'm going to have a unit of wolvers that I'm going to be representing with sort of a unit of large demonic gnolls. There's the one from the Frostgrave set that I'll be using, and then a few from other manufacturers, just kind of playing off of the idea from D&D that gnolls are basically demonically infused hyena men. And I'm going to be using, so I think the wolvers fit that, their rule set fits that pretty well. And after I play a number of games just using the orc rules, using the core rules, sort of getting a better feel for how the game flows, I do plan on writing up my own set sort of gnoll army list to give them their own thing, their own flavor. I know a lot of people on the Facebook have been interested in gnolls. I like them because, it's a classic fantasy race that goes back, 40 years at least to the first edition of D&D, but I really cannot think of any game system that has had a full-fledged gnoll faction. Closest I can think of is, maybe you have the D&D miniatures where there are no hard and fast factions, and then I think Reaper's Warlord skirmish game had a faction that could take gnolls, but it wasn't a gnoll faction. And I think hyenas are creepy and they bug me, and so what better way to deal with that than to make a whole army of them. But yeah, so that's my plans for the foreseeable future. In the next few days, I hope to have some actual pictures of what I've been working on, and I look forward to hearing any feedback from anybody in the community that takes the time to watch this. And yeah, I'd appreciate anything you guys have to say, and I will talk to you later.